After the liberation of Paris on August 25, 1944, the end of the war in Europe was now within sight. French General Charles de Gaulle led the first Allied troops into Paris, to the delight of cheering throngs. The question was not if Germany would fall, but when, and how many more lives would be lost on the way to Berlin. As the Western Allies advanced towards Germany during the fall of 1944, thousands of Nazi soldiers surrendered. However, tens of thousands more were retreating to the east, with the U.S. and Britain in hot pursuit. While the German soldiers were escaping to fight another day, much of their equipment had to be abandoned, including desperately needed planes. With thousands of Allied aircraft now based in England and Western France, the Americans and British controlled the skies and rained death upon the German defenders and their supply lines. As the British and Americans moved west towards the Rhine and the Russians drove towards Germany from the east, it became a contest between the Allies to see who would get to Berlin first. As each army raced towards the Nazi capital, they passed through the towns that had borne the brunt of the war over the past 5 years. By March 1945, the British and American forces had reached the Rhine River. It marked the last major natural obstacle barring the advance of the Western Allies. Fierce fighting around the river momentarily halted the Allies' offensive, with both sides sustaining heavy casualties. But American and British troops would soon improvise crossings that would herald the entry of 85 divisions into Germany. By April, the Germans were in disarray. Masses of German prisoners were being marched to the rear of the Allied lines. The British and Americans were headed full speed towards Berlin when Supreme Commander Dwight Eisenhower made a stunning decision. The Russians would be allowed the honor of capturing the German capital since their armies were closer. The historic first meeting between the United States and Soviet armies would occur not in Berlin, but in a sleepy village 70 miles to the south. On April 25th, at Torgau on the Elbe River, the Soviet and American armies linked up as allies for the first time in history. While the generals talked strategy, the soldiers, realizing the end was near, began to loosen up. As the Russians advanced into Berlin, the price of 5.5 years of war was plainly evident. The beautiful city that had hosted the 1936 Olympics was now nothing more than a hollow shell. On May 8, 1945, the Germans unconditionally surrendered to the Allies. The war in Europe was over. But the real horror of Nazi rule was just beginning to be uncovered. At the Dachau concentration camp, 12 miles north of Munich, the true brutality of the Nazi regime was revealed to the world. Opened in 1933 as one of the first correction camps, it would go on to have a long and bloody history. 32,000 people are officially listed as having been killed there, but the total was certainly much higher. Here, camp survivors are pointing out former camp guards and officials who have tried to blend in with the local villagers. Eventually, the commandant, 40 guards, and one doctor would face a war crimes tribunal. At Dachau and other death camps, the prisoners were subjected to horrifying medical experiments. Among the brutal procedures were the amputation of healthy limbs without anesthesia and the injection of the typhoid virus into inmates. These men are the living proof of the nightmare of Nazi rule. More than 6 million people would be slaughtered by the overall Nazi extermination program. Through the combined might of the free countries of the world, Germany had been defeated. Hitler's plan for a 1,000-year Reich had lasted only 12 years, but had caused a lifetime of suffering for the citizens of Europe. Japan now fought on alone.